Hello everybody, it is Steve Lookner with Agenda Free TV, and if you're watching on YouTube, you are watching on Agenda Free TV too. We haven't been on this channel on Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube in a while. So I'm glad you found it. I think some of our viewers on YouTube don't even know there's an Agenda Free TV 2. So let them know if they're wondering, somebody's saying, where are they? We're at Agenda Free TV 2. If you're watching on our other platforms, we're just on Agenda Free TV. But on YouTube, there are two channels. Just a quick reminder. On YouTube, there are two channels. You guys, I guess, know this because you're here. But there's two channels. This one is Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube. So if you like Agenda Free TV on YouTube, subscribe to the second one as well. I intend to do more streams here. We haven't for a while, but we're here. Yeah, Justice N says somebody will ask why he's not streaming on YouTube every 5 minutes. That will happen. So, look, we have potentially huge developments in border policy tonight. Several different outlets are reporting that President Biden is considering imposing major new action on the border, major new restrictions by executive order. Now, you might say, well, you know, could he have done this before? So remember, there was this border bill discussed in Congress, and there was a bipartisan group of senators that came together and agreed on some strict new border regulations, but then Republicans didn't want to pass it into law. President Biden was saying, you know, give me the power, Congress, to take stronger action. So you might hear this and think, wait a second, he's just going to do this by himself? I thought he couldn't do this by himself. So something to keep in mind is, you know, he could take some executive action on the border to impose restrictions, and then there could be a lawsuit over that. So I'm guessing some of these articles will mention that, but you know, there's a risk if he tries to do it this way that the courts could eventually say, no, you can't impose this by executive action. It's got to be done through a new law. So there's that whole question about this, but we'll talk about it. But you know, and I see some people discussing this in the chat. You know, some of this politics, there's a whole political angle. I don't have to tell most of you there's a presidential election this fall. So it's a very interesting situation where maybe as soon as the next few days, President Biden could attempt to unilaterally by himself impose strong new restrictions on the border, with a focus perhaps on restricting the ability of migrants to ask for asylum or to get grants of asylum. What a lot of migrants do is they cross the border and they say, I want asylum, I'm being persecuted in my home country, and you know, then they're a lot of times migrants, because there's nowhere to detain them and there's a backup of court cases, they're told, hey, they're released into the country and said, you know, they're told, come back in a few years for your court date or whatever. So the idea would be to possibly prevent people from even being able to ask for asylum, or to speed that process way up, that whole asylum process, and perhaps make it harder for people to actually be successful in their request for asylum. So we're going to talk about this, but it's a very, very interesting development. Just came out today and tonight, several different outlets reporting that President Biden is considering, possibly in the next few days, imposing by executive action strict new border regulations. So we're going to talk about this and take your comments and questions. You can write to me at Lookner on X is where you can reach me, at Lookner on X. And I already saw it. Somebody said you're not on YouTube. We're going to have to repeat this a bunch. Maybe the mods can keep repeating it. We are on YouTube, but we're on Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube. There are two news channels on YouTube. Two news channels. This is on Agenda Free TV 2. So if you're looking on YouTube and you don't see us, you're not on the right channel. Go to Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube. You can find the link to that at the bottom of the Agenda Free TV page. All right? All right. Okay. So, pinned message. Well, I mean, if I pin it in YouTube, it doesn't do much good because people are already there if they're on YouTube. But if people ask in one of the other platforms, you can mention to them that we're on AFTV too if you feel like it. All right, let's start by what was I going to say? Talking about one of these reports from Politico. Politico is reporting this. Biden considering major new executive actions for migrant crisis. New York Times, Biden mulling plan that could restrict asylum claims at the border. CNN, Biden considering new executive action to restrict asylum at the border, sources say. Wow. Let's start with Politico, see what they're reporting on this. But this could happen soon. I feel like this story is a bit under the radar right now. I feel like this should be a bigger story. I mean, if he actually does this, and it seems like he might, it's going to be an enormous story. So I think it's a big story to hear these reports coming out. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see. So Politico reports, the Biden administration is considering a string of new executive actions and federal regulations in an effort to curb migration at the U.S. southern border. Now, this isn't a new law. This is them going it alone. This would be the Biden administration just trying to do it through executive action, not through a change in the law. The change of the law requires Congress to change the law, along with the president. But the border deal failed, so no change in the law coming anytime soon. The proposals under consideration would represent a sweeping new approach to an issue that has stymied the White House since its first days in office and could potentially place the president at odds with key constituencies. Now, really interesting politics coming into play here. Some Democrats who don't want stricter border regulations could be upset. But maybe, Biden figures this could be really helpful for him in November. Maybe with independents or some Republicans. Among the ideas under discussion include using a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act to bar immigrants from seeking asylum in between U.S. ports of entry. If I remember the numbers right, most migrants who come across the border and who ask for asylum are not asking for it at the border crossings. They are illegally crossing in between the border crossings, and then they get encountered by some border agent and they say, "I want asylum. I'm requesting asylum," and then legally they have to go through this whole process. So if Biden did successfully bar migrants from seeking asylum in between U.S. ports of entry, that would, if I remember the statistics right, that would apply to the large majority of migrants who ask for asylum, because most of them are asking in between the border crossings, not at the border crossings. The administration is also discussing tying that directive to a trigger, meaning it would only come into effect after a certain number of illegal crossings took place, said the three people who were granted anonymity to discuss private deliberations, says Politico. A trigger mechanism was part of a bipartisan Senate border deal that never reached the floor earlier this month. During the deal's construction, President Joe Biden repeatedly said it would have given him the authority to shut down the border. He actually said he would have shut down the border on the day that the bill was signed, but the bill never passed. Also, in addition to amounting to what would amount to preventing most migrants from even requesting asylum, the administration is also trying to adjust the whole process by which people request asylum and what their chances of success are. As you can see here, the administration is also discussing ways to make it harder for migrants to pass the initial screening for asylum seekers, essentially raising the credible fear standard, as well as ways to quickly deport others who don't meet those elevated asylum standards. Two of the people said the policy announcements could come as soon as next week ahead of President Biden's State of the Union speech March 7th. Let me read that again. Two of the people said these new policy announcements could come as soon as next week ahead of President Biden's State of the Union speech on March 7th. So maybe even by next week, this will be announced. This would be a huge deal if this is announced by Biden. Wow. So maybe even by next week. By the way, if you're wondering what asylum is when people go to another country and they basically say, take me in for protection, that kind of thing. You can see here, UNHCR. Asylum is a form of protection which allows an individual to remain in the United States instead of being removed, deported to a country where he or she fears persecution or harm. Under U.S. law, people who flee their countries because they fear persecution can apply for asylum. If they are granted asylum, this gives them protection and the right to stay in the United States. Those who are granted asylum are called asylees. But remember, in the U.S., you have a lot of migrants who come in and request asylum. And there's a whole process that legally they're allowed, that they must be taken through. And many migrants get a court date to adjudicate their asylum claim, but because of backlogs in immigration courts, and because there's nowhere a shortage of places to detain people, they are released into the country, basically told, come back for your court date, could be years in advance. So, if that whole process could be sped up, and also if you make it harder for people to pass their initial screening that might be necessary to even get the court date, that could result in a lot fewer people in that situation where they're given a court date, where they pass the initial screening and they're given a court date, years down the road, and they just go into the country. So these are major changes possibly being considered by President Biden now. The slate of policies, says Politico, could allow administration officials to fill some of the void left after congressional Republicans killed a bipartisan border deal in the Senate. But it would open up the administration to criticism that it always had the tools at its disposal to more fully address the migrant crisis, but waited to use them. Right. So, there was this a Republican talking point was, we don't need a border deal. President Biden can just do stuff on his own. And President Biden was saying, I need a border deal. Now, if he takes this action, does that mean he's changed his mind and decided he can do everything on his own? Well, as I mentioned, one possibility is you could have Biden, take executive actions, and then they are subject to lawsuits where some buddy or some group sues him and says, no, legally you can't do this through executive action. So I don't know if even if he were to try to impose these policies by executive action, maybe that could be a tough road. I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing what some legal experts say about this. From my non-specialist understanding, it is more likely that these things would be allowed to stay on the books if it's passed through a law rather than done through executive action. But I'm not sure. So let's see. I'm going to take some comments in a second. I just want to go through the rest of this, what Politico is reporting right now. Let's see here. No final decisions have been made about what executive actions, if any, could be taken, administration official said. Blah, 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 blah. Administrations often explore a number of options, the official said, though it doesn't necessarily mean the policies will come to fruition. I kind of wonder if this is like floating it out there, Maybe they're thinking of doing this, right? And they're like, how will the country respond? How will Democrats respond to this? So maybe a couple administration officials give a few crumbs to places like Politico, maybe, and you get these stories written, and then they can kind of gauge how people are responding to the stories. I don't know. Maybe that's going on. Let's see here. The consideration, Politico says, the consideration of new executive action comes as the White House tries to turn the border deal failure into a political advantage for the president. You know, I could imagine Biden taking these executive actions and saying, look, I mean, do you imagine this is what he'll say? He'll say something like, look, I tried to work with the Republicans. We had a deal. They don't want to pass anything. So I had to do it myself. So we do stuff and Republicans don't. I'm not saying you have to agree with that, viewer. I'm just saying my guess is that if Biden takes this executive action to just try to impose these new regulations, he will, make that comparison and claim Republicans don't actually want to do anything about it, whereas we're doing something about it. Let's see here. It also comes amid growing concern among Democrats that the southern border presents a profound election liability for the party. Officials hope that policy announcements will drive down numbers of migrants coming to the border and demonstrate to voters they're exhausting all options to try to solve the problem as peak migration season quickly approaches. Okay. Let's see here. The three people familiar with the planning cautioned that the details of the proposed actions remain murky and that the impact of the policies, particularly the asylum ban, is also dependent on the specific language of the federal regulation, they said. Okay. There are other complications as well. The implementation of any action from the White House could come without the funding and resources that could make implementation easier. That's very interesting. Though the administration is looking into ways to unlock additional funding. Right. The actions would likely face legal challenges as well. The idea is if Biden tries to impose these new restrictions through executive action without Congress passing a new law, somebody might say, no, that's unconstitutional. You can't make this change just on your own without passing a new law. So we'll have to see. Let's see. You can see here, the Trump administration repeatedly used Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act to aggressively shape the immigration system. In late 2018, President Trump signed a policy that temporarily barred migrants who tried to illegally cross into the U.S. outside of official ports of entry. It was quickly blocked by a federal judge in California. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with the decision, which was then upheld by the Supreme Court. So that was a case where President Trump tried to impose a stronger border regulation by executive action, and ultimately the courts did not allow it. The policies once announced will likely be met with steep backlash from immigration advocates who will claim the president is once again walking back on his campaign promises to rebuild a humane immigration system and protect the right to asylum. So I want to take some comments from you, but very interesting here. Politico reports that Biden is considering, for one, making it so that you cannot ask for asylum if you're not at a border crossing, official border crossing. I think you have to have appointments you have to be pre-approved they give you like a time to show up at the border crossing if you want to do it there. Most migrants who are requesting asylum these days are not doing it at the border crossings. They're crossing illegally between the border crossings and they're requesting it when they get encountered by a border agent. Actually, I should show you that. I believe I have statistics on that. I definitely had it when we did this. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Southwest Land Border Encounters. This must be it. Is this it? Let's see. Where is it? We want southern border. I'll have to look it up because I want to get the exact. Southwest Land Border Encounters by component. That might not be what I want. I'll have to find it. I'll try and find it in a second. Anyways, I want to take some comments from you guys on this. But I really think unless I'm remembering wrong, I really think that the large majority of those asking for asylum are asking in between the border crossings. January. What does this say? We'll worry about that after. Encounters. All right. I want to read some comments from you guys. What do you think about this? Do you think President Biden is going to, like next week, announce that he's taking executive action to impose strict new border regulations? What do you think? At Lookner on X, I want to hear from you. And I want to take some comments right now. And I do want to thank our moderators, by the way. I'll thank them in a second. Hebrew Jerusalem Prince thinks this would not go well if he did this. Why? In what way would it not go well? What do you think? Papa Wheelie says must be election season. Jack Carr says, can't totally argue it's a political move, though, either, considering it's February, not November. I'm guessing some people might disagree with you, Jack, but I know what you're saying. Let's see. Melissa Stewart says, well, I'm glad some solution is in the works. No complaining here. Wall Street on Twitch says, this is the biggest threat to our country. Do nothing Congress, overly partisan. Mort says, I think he's testing the Republicans hard and see if they're serious. Oh, I had a thought about this, by the way. Is there any chance, I bet you're going to say no. Is there any chance that if Biden seems really close to just unilaterally himself imposing strict new border regulations, could the Republicans be like, wait a second, we don't want him to do this. We don't want him to do this and get all the credit for it. So would the Republicans all of a sudden be like, okay, we'll work with you on the border deal? You see what I'm saying? I mean, you're probably going to say no. It's just a thought I had. Justice N says, I doubt it. Melissa Terry says, I was wondering why he hadn't done that yet. Brad says, nothing but Politico. Oh, guess what, guys? It's been 5 minutes, so somebody said you're not on YouTube. What do we say when somebody says you're not on YouTube right now? What do we tell them? We are on YouTube. We're on Agenda Free TV too. Say it, everybody. We're on Agenda Free TV 2, the second channel on YouTube. That's where we are. We're there. We're just not at Agenda Free TV. Agenda Free TV 2 is for like some of the smaller stories or is for some developing stories. This is like a developing story. It hasn't happened yet. So. Maybe so, go over to YouTube if you normally watch there and you want to watch on YouTube. 50 Shades of Mahomes says, what's the risk? He offers to fix it, and if it gets overturned, he can blame Republicans for not passing it into law. Look, so it's an interesting point. Well, I think the risk is, one risk is that he angers a segment of the Democratic Party that does not want strict new border regulations. And wants him to do more, say, to help dreamers, and help people already in the country illegally who are trying to become legal, and help people get asylum. So there's certainly a significant segment of the Democratic Party that does not want strict new border regulations, especially if they're not balanced with anything. You're not hearing. The story is not Biden is going to announce strict new border regulations by executive action, but he's also going to balance that by, say, some new program where it would make it easier for people who are already in the country and not legal yet to become legal. You're not hearing any balancing. So there might be Democrats who say, hey, if you're going to do this, you should balance it off with something to help people who are trying to get in the country, and trying to kind of get in the country legally. So that would be a risk. But I do see what you're saying is, maybe Biden thinks, I'll try it and it's going to get struck down by the courts. And so come November, I can say I did it, but the Democrats won't be that mad at me because it won't actually be taking place. It won't be in effect. It's an interesting thought. Okay, let's see. Fish Taco said Biden had 3 years to do this. Hey, thanks to our moderators, by the way. We're going to talk about this, some more reporting on this. I was just showing you the Politico report. We got more reporting for you on this. I want to say a quick thanks to him. Oh, first of all, a thanks to Haniel Vargas. Haniel says unilateral executive action circumventing Congress. Right. So he would be, if this happened, he would be attempting to do it just through executive action, not with Congress passing a law. I don't know if that's legal. And I'm not a constitutional law expert. I'm not an immigration law expert. As you could see in the Politico article, at the bottom it says, the actions would likely face legal challenges, right? So somebody would sue and say, you can't do this. Congress has got to pass a law for this for this policy change. I can't intelligently comment on how that would turn out. Yes. Thanks, Haniel. Thanks also, David Spivak. I appreciate it, David Spivak. Thanks for your support. And let me thank our moderators. We have moderating here on YouTube. It's Agenda Free TV too. Remember, on YouTube. Havasu Mom. Good to see you, Havasu Mom. BZ, Sarah 55, Emily. They're all there on Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube. And Danny James is there. Hey, Danny, thank you. Over there on Agenda Free TV on Facebook, Twitch, and X. We got Linda Belk and Larry moderate for us on X. Over on Facebook, we have moderating. Kay Larry Body is there. Margaret Riley. We have Idaho Star over on Twitch. Good luck, Duck. David Green. I got that fire. Sharon C54. Thanks to Sparky Pilot for subscribing on Twitch. Again, I do feel like people are sleeping on this story a bit. This would be a huge deal. I mean, think of how big the border deal possibility was as a story and how much that was talked about. Well, we could have, Politico says as soon as next week, we could have the president just saying, okay, I'm imposing or I'm attempting to impose all these policies. That'd be a huge deal. Thanks, David Spivak. We don't have memberships on this channel yet. Maybe one day. This is Agenda Free TV too. It's different from Agenda Free TV. So we're not really on the air enough at this. I'd like to use this channel more, and maybe we will in the coming weeks. Lately, we have not been on this channel that much, so we don't have. It'd be kind of weird to have memberships on it. But thank you for asking. But maybe if we start using the channel more on YouTube, we'll open up memberships on this channel. But if you want to be a member, I think you're already a member on Agenda Free TV. That's cool too. Let's see. Our viewer Basic says 3 years too late. Damage has been done just to prevent a talking point for Trump, says Basics. I really want to get the statistics. Southwest border encounters at border crossings and between statistics. Where are the statistics? Here. Hang on. See, these are component. Encounters? Ah, is that it? OFO. What is OFO? Office of Field Operations. Are these the ones at the border crossings? I got to just find it. Pew Research. I'll have to go back and look. The number I'm trying to find is the people who request asylum not at the border crossings, in between the border crossings. So like they don't have an appointment to show up at the border crossing and arrest asylum. They just try to cross between the border, they get caught, and they request asylum. And I think that's a lot more. If you have a link to that, let me know, because I had it before, and I can't find it right now. Let's show you another report. I'm going to show you the New York Times report on this. 50 Shades of Mahone says, what's the risk? He offers to fix it, and if it gets overturned, he can blame Republicans for not passing it into law. Again, the risk is there are a significant portion of Democrats who don't want stronger new border regulations. And maybe if you upset them enough, fewer of them come out and vote for you. So as Politico said in their article here, it could potentially place the president at odds with key constituencies. That's what they're saying there. So that's the risk. That's one risk. Mark Allen, our viewer, says, policies aside, a pretty clear political move from President Biden stripped Trump's ability to call him weak on the border and flips the script, equipping Biden to cast himself as the hero despite obstructionist GOP Congress. That's what Mark thinks Biden might have in mind. Thanks, Mark, for writing in. Let's see here. All right, let's show you something. Let's talk about a different report here. Big news. I think this is a big story. President Biden, multiple reports in different outlets say he is considering imposing by executive order, with no new law in Congress, he'll just take executive actions to make big changes in border policy. Big restrictions on who can ask for asylum and what they have to do to be successful in asking for asylum, that kind of stuff. Big restrictions. We got to find those statistics. Wait, I bet I can find it. Hold on a second. I think it's important. Those statistics are important. Before I get to that report, let me just see if I can find the statistics here. Give me 1 second. I'll look. And if I can't find them in a second, I'll come back later. I know they're here because we did a story on this like a month ago and I had all these statistics handy. Let's see. Do I still have the links? I'm looking. Do I have them? Ooh, I think I might. I'm looking here. I can't find it. Can I? All right, let's talk about the New York Times report. Biden mulling plan that could restrict asylum claims at the border. The action under consideration could prevent people from making asylum claims during border crossing surges. The White House says it's far from a decision on the matter. So, what that would allow is, if people aren't allowed to claim asylum, then that would mean that the Border Patrol could just grab people and then just deport them. There would be no processing, no, we have to listen to your asylum request, no, you get, if you pass a certain standard, you get to have a hearing with a judge kind of thing. None of that. If you say the people can't even ask for asylum, then if somebody gets caught, You know, they put them in a truck, put them in a plane, whatever, take them back. No process. No process they have to go through. Very different than what happens now. The White House says it's far from a decision on the matter. Really feels to me like they're floating this to see what people say. They're considering it and floating it. President Biden is considering executive action that could prevent people who cross illegally into the United States from claiming asylum. Several people with knowledge of the proposal said Wednesday. The move would suspend long-time guarantees that give anyone who steps onto U.S. soil the right to ask for safe haven. I'm sorry to be a broken record, but you need to understand. What happens is people cross the border a lot of times because they know they very well might get caught. But their strategy is, well, I'm illegally allowed to ask for asylum. And so I'll ask for asylum, and then there's a decent chance that they won't have enough housing to detain me, and there's a backlog in the court cases, and they'll say, here, you're allowed to go into the country, but come back in 3 years for your court case or whatever. So, you know, it would be an enormous change if people are not allowed to ask for asylum, and that if people are just allowed to be taken. That's not the way it is right now. Border Patrol legally is not allowed to just take everybody and ship them out as soon as they encounter them. It doesn't work that way. But something like this would make it work that way. The order would put into effect a key policy in a bipartisan bill that Republicans thwarted earlier this month, even though it had some of the most significant border security restrictions Congress had contemplated in years. That bill, the border deal that failed, would have essentially shut down the border to new entrants if more than an average of 5,000 migrants per day tried to cross unlawfully in the course of a week, or more than 8,500 tried to cross in a given day, both numbers that were lower than the averages in December, for example. The action under consideration by the White House would have a similar trigger for blocking asylum to new entrants, the people with knowledge of the proposal say. The move, if enacted, would echo a 2018 effort by President Trump, to block migration, which was assailed by Democrats and blocked by federal courts. Although such an action would undoubtedly face legal challenges, the fact that Mr. Biden is considering it shows just how far he has shifted on immigration since he came into office, promising a more humane system after the Trump years. Look, we talked about this a couple months ago. Remember when the border deal was under consideration and President Biden released a statement just touting the fact that this border deal had really strict new regulations and saying, I will shut down the border the day that this bill is signed. And I was saying to you guys, we were talking about this. We were talking about how, I was saying, this is crazy to see a Democrat saying this. Could you imagine, a few years ago, hearing a Democrat saying, hey, everybody, I'm going to shut down the border. I want to do this. Give me the power to shut down the border. It was like a total reversal in what you normally hear. So the fact that now we're talking about Biden, a Democratic president, unilaterally imposing these really strict border regulations, maybe shutting down the border if enough people start coming across, basically, that's a huge change. That's a big change. It does show how everything has shifted on it. Mr. Biden has taken a much harder line as the number of people crossing the U.S.-Mexico border has reached record levels and the chronically underfunded and understaffed asylum system reaches a breaking point. Still, even if... Now, this is a good point, though. Politico made this point, too. You can change the policy, but you need to have the resources to carry it out. Still, even if Mr. Biden tried to take unilateral action to cut down on the number of people claiming asylum, a lack of resources would still be an enormous obstacle to any major changes at the border. U.S. officials have said they needed a massive infusion of cash to hire Border Patrol agents to catch people and asylum officers to expand detention facilities. A White House official said no decisions had been made, but people with knowledge of the proposal said Biden could cite his authority to act under Section 212F of the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act, which allows the president to suspend immigration for anyone determined to be detrimental to the interests of the United States. Mr. Trump used the same authority to impose a ban on people from several predominantly Muslim countries during his presidency. See, look, this is an example of the legal challenges right here. Lee Gerland, a lawyer with the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, who helped argue against the Trump effort, said his group would challenge such a policy. The courts were emphatic that the Trump administration could not deny asylum based on simply on how one entered the country. Mr. Gerland said, hopefully the Biden administration is not considering recycling this patently unlawful and unworkable policy. Look, this is why, stuff like this, where if the president tries to do something to change policy without changing the law, someone, for example, can sue and say, well, that policy is against the law. So as I understand it, the policy would be on much more solid footing if it was done through a law passed by Congress and the president, not executive action. But a legal fight, regardless of the outcome, could allow Mr. Biden to try to neutralize one of his biggest political vulnerabilities, the chaos at the southern border, says the New York Times. Republicans have repeatedly used the border crisis to portray Mr. Biden as weak on enforcement. A legal battle would allow him to spotlight Republicans' refusal to provide him the power to crack down at the border through legislation. Interesting. So if he tries to do this and the courts don't let him do it, he could say, look, I'm trying. If you would just pass the law, change the law, Congress, Republicans in Congress, then we wouldn't have to go through this legal battle. The Biden administration has spent several years trying to curb migration, in part by limiting asylum for those who cross through Mexico on their way to the United States. That policy made it more difficult for migrants to obtain asylum if they crossed through a third country on the way to the U.S. It did not apply for protections there. But while the policy restriction raised the bar for migrants to gain asylum, U.S. officials cannot carry it out properly without the kind of resources Biden had hoped that Congress would approve. The failed border deal would have provided billions in funding, including the hiring of thousands of asylum officers to process claims. The Times says some of the circumstances at the southern border are well beyond the president's control, including historic migration across the hemisphere from Venezuela, Haiti, Honduras, and other countries facing instability, violence, and natural disasters. But Mr. Biden is under pressure from both parties, not just from the usual Republican critics, to do something. Some Democratic cities have found themselves overwhelmed as migrants, often without coats or family members in the United States, arrived. Leaders in the president's own party started issuing cries for help. That pressure has scrambled the politics of immigration in an election year, giving Mr. Biden much more room to support border measures once denounced by Democrats and championed by Mr. Trump. Wow. So if you want to read the rest of the article, go to the New York Times. Are we going to see Biden, even as soon as next week, that Politico said it could be as soon as next week, announce major new border restrictions? Say he's going to take executive action and try to do it himself. That would be a huge deal. Let me know what you think. I want to take some more comments from you. At Lookner on X. Hey, a quick thanks so much to Y Chin for your support. Really appreciate that, Y Chin. David Fairiello says, so it's not because it's the right thing, it's about politics and being elected in November. Tom Mix says, legal failure on executive action will just make him look even weaker and more ineffectual. Let's see here. She Clicks Brick says this is a huge shift. Does it say anything about those already in the U.S.? I have not heard that any of the new restrictions would apply to people already in the U.S. I'm not sure, but I haven't read anything about that. Let's see. Paula Thompson says, I think he may be calling their bluff. Ex-Unix Unitix1 says he needs the votes and is willing to do anything to get the votes. Stasha Morgan says the president shouldn't have to create an executive order. It's up to Congress. Respect, our viewer says, how can anyone take conservative complaining about the border seriously at this point when the people they elect won't even take action for fear it will help Biden's polling? New account 645 says, is Biden going to build more wall than Trump? None of the new proposal that I've seen, proposals talked about in these articles, talk about new wall construction. Thanks, Wilder Side, for your support. Much appreciated, Wilder Side. Thank you. By the Sea says he may lose the election for the Democrats based on this one issue. There's a whole other report I want to show you, by the way, from CNN. Biden considering new executive action to restrict asylum at the border, sources say. We'll talk about that in a second. I really want to find, I almost want to go back and see and look at my own broadcast from 2 months ago when we had those statistics on where people are... CBS News had a report on this too. I want to show you where people actually ask for asylum at the border crossing versus in between the border crossing. Southwest border crossing statistics. See, this is the overall statistics. This is this everything, or is this southern border? This is nationwide. Where's southern? Where is southern? Region, southwest land border. December, over 300,000 southwest land border encounters. But where does it break down the numbers? Right there. I can't find it. If anyone can find where they break down the southwest border land encounters between at the border crossings versus between the border crossings, please let me know. Is Office of Field Operations at the border crossings? Office of Field Operations versus Border Patrol. That's what I want. Yes, Office of Field Operations are responsible for America's border security at ports of entry. So they're not patrolling in between the border crossings. They're at the border crossings. Office of Field Operations, CBP officer. So my understanding, if we go back to the statistics here, is, where did it go? Right. So like in December, there were over 300,000 encounters between U.S. officers and people crossing the southern border. And if you go here and you go to component and you click on Office of Field Operations, is that going to work? Apply. Right. So Office of Field Operations, at the border crossings in December, 52,000 people asked for asylum. Or no, there were 52,000 people were encountered. I don't know. I think most of them asked for asylum. But most encounters with people, I think that's at the border crossings. That's like, I think there's like an app people can use to request, to say, I want to request asylum. And then if you win the lottery basically on the app, or you get through, they'll give you an appointment to come at the border crossing and request asylum. But most of the people who are requesting asylum are not doing that. So you can see 50,000 in December, around there were around 52,000 encounters with officers at the border crossings, the official border crossings, whereas Border Patrol, which I think is in between the border crossings, that's 250,000 encounters. And the reason I'm making that distinction is because we're seeing these reports that one of the things Biden might do is say, if you're crossing in between the border crossings, if you don't have like an appointment at the border crossing and you try to cross in between the border crossings and illegally just come into the country, and then you say, I request asylum. The reports we're seeing are saying that Biden's going to say, nope, you're not allowed to even request it. You're only allowed to, if you're in between border crossings, where most of these encounters happen, you can't even request asylum. Now, there's this question could that come into play if a certain number is hit? But that would be a huge change to say people in between the border crossings can't request asylum. Because from my understanding, that's most of the people requesting asylum. Let me take some more comments, and we'll show you a couple more of these reports here. Let's see here. You can reach me on X @Lookner. Do you think this is going to happen? Do you think this is going to happen? Cherry Cola says he is trying to trump Trump. Let's see here. ZZ Fly says we need a Trump-Biden debate and we need it now. Hey, we got somebody else saying, are you live on YouTube? I am live on YouTube, but everyone, I'm on Agenda Free TV 2, our other channel on YouTube, where we sometimes do developing stories. So go to Agenda Free TV 2. Okay. All right, let's take a look at another one of these reports. Mary McHugh, too, thinks this is going to happen. Biden considering new executive action to restrict asylum at the border, sources say. Can you imagine? This would be such big news if he does that. It would be such big news. Could you imagine Biden doing a big announcement where he says, I am imposing these new restrictions on the border. I'm going to shut the border down, basically, if enough people come across in a given week or something. What a change that would be. Okay. Ruin Nation said it would be considered a stunt because he's let it go for 3 years. All right. CNN reports the White House is considering executive action to restrict migrants' ability to seek asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border if they crossed illegally. A maneuver reminiscent of controversial action from the Trump era and is sure to invite fierce backlash from immigration advocates and progressives. And when you say cross illegally, so I want to talk about how can you legally apply for asylum with app. There's an app. Where is it here? CBP1 app, right? CBP1 mobile application. Where is asylum here? CBP strongly encourages non-citizens without prior authorization to the United States to use the CBP1 mobile app to request an appointment to present themselves at a land port of entry. Appointments are available 21 days in advance. So you can, if you have an appointment, you can show up at the border crossing and you can legally show up and say, I request asylum. That would be an example of doing it legally, where you have talked to the U.S. government and said you're going to do this, and they've said show up at this time. That's an example of doing it legally. CNN says the White House is considering executive action to restrict migrants' ability to seek asylum at the border if they crossed illegally. So, for example, if you just like swam across some river and they encountered you, the Border Patrol caught you. The new restriction would be like, you can't even ask for asylum in that case, whereas now you can. The handling of the U.S.-Mexico border has dogged President Biden for years as migration across the Western Hemisphere has reached record levels and resulted in hundreds of thousands of migrants arriving at the border. Millions. The action being considered at the White House appears to be an extension of some of the toughest measures in the border compromise legislation tanked by Republicans, and another sign of the White House's efforts to show they're aggressive on border security ahead of Election Day. No final decision has made, guys. No final decision has been made on the action under consideration, which involves using an authority known as 212F between ports of entry to try to clamp down on unlawful border crossings. That is most of the encounters, most of the times that people are coming across the border and they encounter an officer, is most of it's happening between the border crossings. In December, roughly 5 out of 6 encounters between migrants and border officers were in between the border crossings. An administration official noted that the administration often evaluates actions that could be taken, but they don't always move forward. It's unclear how the proclamation under discussion would be executed and what, if anything, would be different from what was enacted during the Trump administration. Lawyers within the administration have been reviewing the action, one source said. A White House spokesperson, Angelo Hernandez, said the administration spent months negotiating in good faith to deliver the toughest and fairest bipartisan border security bill in decades, because we need Congress to make significant policy reforms and to provide additional funding to secure our border and fix our broken immigration system. The White House spokesperson added, no executive action, no matter how aggressive, can deliver the significant policy reforms and additional resources Congress can provide and that Republicans rejected. We continue to call on Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to pass the bipartisan deal to secure the border. Biden had suggested earlier this month he would shut down the U.S. Mexico border if the proposed border legislation had been signed into law, effectively embracing one of the toughest measures included in the package. Trump tried to close the U.S. southern border to asylum seekers crossing the border unlawfully while in office, invoking provisions in immigration law, but was blocked by the courts, which also might happen to President Biden if he tries this. In 2018, Trump tried to use 212F, which gives the president broad authority to implement immigration restrictions to restrict border crossings, but ultimately a federal appeals court ruled the authority conflicts with asylum law, and the 212F authority doesn't override it. The case served as an example of why the president is limited in his ability to shut down the border. It is likely to face legal challenges if the White House were to move forward with it. An immigration law expert, Stephen Lohr, said to CNN, President Biden has broad powers under the immigration statute, but they are not unlimited. Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act allows a president to suspend the entry of non-citizens who are, quote, detrimental to the interests of the United States, but that doesn't mean he can just shut the border to everyone. Interesting. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. This is interesting. Migrant apprehensions have dropped 50% in January compared to December, according to federal data. Homeland Security officials have attributed the decline to ongoing high-level talks between the U.S. and Mexico, which has doubled up on enforcement, but have cautioned encounters historically drop in January before ticking up again. Okay. Give me a shout. Do you think Biden's going to go through with this? Politico said it could happen as soon as next week. Do you think Biden will, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to do a poll. We're going to do a poll right now. We're going to do a poll. Will Biden take executive action to impose strong new border restrictions? I just posted it on YouTube. We'll post it on Twitch too. Do you think Biden's going to do this? I honestly don't know. I mean, I feel like if this is coming out of the White House, this has to be leaked out there from the White House. I feel like there's a decent chance of it. Posting it on Twitch. Okay. Over there on YouTube, let me show you what people on YouTube had to say about this. Here's what people at YouTube had to say. 64% of our YouTube voters say that Biden will do this. Almost 2 in 3 of our YouTube voters say Biden is going to do this. He's going to take unilateral action to impose much stronger border restrictions. Lori Corinnes says, I think he will try, followed by court challenges. So that's what it's looking like over there on YouTube. And then on Twitch, I am seeing Twitch is closer. Twitch is 55% yes, 45% no. Paul Wildigo says, yes, he will. Blue Pip says, I agree with Shaggy. I didn't hear what Shaggy said. Maybe I can find it. He doesn't have to do it, merely suggest doing it, and when Republicans go against it, they own it. I was thinking like, right now, I have to imagine this is being leaked out there by the White House. So my initial thinking was, well, why would they want to leak this out there if there's not a decent chance he'll do it? But I was thinking maybe they leak it out because like they're thinking of doing it, but they want to kind of just see if people are going to get super angry about it before they actually do it. But I mean, I don't know if they really would want the backlash from it if they weren't actually seriously thinking about doing it. Would they want the backlash of this getting out there and all these stories being written on it? All right, let me end the poll. It was 62-38 yes on YouTube, by the way. Rear Patton says 1 month before election for votes. Emily Brooks says he needs to. It's far too out of hand. Thanks, Jack's Animals, for the bits on Twitch. Thanks, I Got That Fire, for subscribing. Also, Anonymous Gifter, who gave a subscription. Thanks, Nancy Elizabeth, for subscribing on Twitch. Sea Turtle thinks he wants it before the State of the Union address. What a political stunt. Politico mentioned the State of the Union address. That's on March 7th. They said, in the Politico article, it said, where is it here? Where is it here? Two of the people said the policy announcements could come as soon as next week ahead of President Biden's State of the Union speech on March 7th. Let's see here. Doug Rabbit says this is nothing more than clear vote buying. Kinda sick playing with the American people's lives. Thanks to Tipsy Gypsy, by the way. Appreciate your support. Tipsy Gypsy. Shaft says, just get something done. Anita Little says, I'm sure Biden will definitely do it, sending a message. There's a CBS News report about this too. I think eventually everybody's going to have a report about it. Wall Street Journal and Washington Post didn't report about it yet. I was waiting for them. Let's see here. Oh, Axios has a report now. Show you that one. We're going to look at this one too. This is from the CBS one. Biden weighs invoking executive authority to stage border crackdown ahead of 2024 election. D. Sykes, our viewer, says it's clever. It forces the Republican Party to run on some form of policy if he does do something on the border issue. And he says a number of outlets are talking about this too, News Nation, etc. Mr. Showtime thinks if it gets done, Republicans will be mad. It'd be really interesting if this happens, if he just does it. Lori Corwin says, I think Speaker Johnson has been saying the president can order some by executive order. Well, look, so this Republican talking point, when the Republicans refused to go along with the Senate bipartisan border deal, is one of the things they've been saying is, well, you know, President Biden can do this stuff anyway. He doesn't need a law. But I wonder if first of all, is the real reason just because Trump doesn't want it, because Trump likes having the border issue to run on in the election in November and doesn't want to fix and doesn't want Biden to get any credit. So you might think that the other reasons given are just fake reasons, and the real reason is they just are doing it because Trump doesn't want it to be solved before the election. But anyways, but that aside, I do wonder if when Republicans say, why hasn't he done anything about this? He could do something if he wanted to do it by himself. Did they actually think he would try to do it by himself? Like that's why one of the viewers said she thought that Biden would be calling their bluff. If I don't know if Republicans, if Biden did this, is this something the Republicans thought he might do, or would they be surprised by him doing this? Are Republicans, when they're reading this story tonight, are they like, Republicans in Congress, they're like, wait, is he really going to do this? I didn't think he'd do this. It's an interesting question. Blessed Veteran says, everyone needs to call their rep and tell them to pass the border deal. Erin McCune says, I just wish someone would do something about the border. Left-handed says, that's definitely a strategy being used, no doubt about it. I don't know which one the left-handed was talking about. One of the things I was saying. Thanks to Director AZ Arketer for watching on X. Sea Turtle says, was wondering why he didn't just do that long ago. Well, the politics have really changed on it. This would be unthinkable. Biden saying, I'm going to pass the border bill, I'm going to close the border the day you It's the day it's signed. Biden considering cracking down on the border. This would have been unthinkable just a few years ago for a Democratic president or a Democratic candidate to be saying these things or considering these things. All right, let's see what CBS News has to say. President Biden is debating whether to invoke sweeping presidential authority that gained infamy during the Trump administration to stage a crackdown on migrants coming to the U.S. southern border. Mr. Biden is citing a law dating back to 1952 to severely restrict access to the U.S. asylum system, which has buckled under the weight of record levels of migrant arrivals along the border with Mexico, the sources said. That law, known as 212F, allows the president to suspend the entry of foreigners when it is determined their arrival is not in the best interest of the country. The Trump administration used the law several times, including to ban immigration and travel from certain countries, most of them predominantly Muslim, and to bar migrants from asylum if they entered the country unlawfully. If approved, if approved, Mr. Biden's executive action could be announced within the next 2 weeks. Now remember, the State of the Union is in 2 weeks. The State of the Union is on the 7th. Is it a leap year this year? It is, isn't it? Leap year? I have to look at my calendar. Every 4 years, right? Yes. So we're 15 days away. 15 days away from the State of the Union. So when I see that 2 weeks, that sounds like State of the Union, right? Because that's what Politico said, maybe before the State of the Union. That's interesting timing. The executive action could be announced within the next 2 weeks. Administration officials said no final decisions have been made. Any significant restriction on asylum would face formidable legal and operational hurdles. So remember, it's much easier to actually carry this. If you don't do it by changing the law and the president just tries to do it on his own without changing the law, then one thing that can happen is there can be a lawsuit that says you can't do this because it's actually against the law. So the changes would be much more likely to stand if they were actually done through, changing the law. But Congress is not going to pass a law at this point. Any significant restriction on asylum would face formidable legal and operational hurdles. We've heard operational. They might not have the budget to implement it now. We saw a couple other reports say, Biden might not have enough resources to really put any changes into place like he wants to, and that, to get more resources, the best way to do it is have Congress pass additional funding, which is not happening right now. Anyways, still, says CBS News, issuing an executive order designed to curb illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border could be seen as an important political message from Mr. Biden ahead of the 2024 election. Border policy is one of Biden's worst polling issues, with multiple polls showing a majority of Americans disapproving of his handling of immigration. The executive order would also cement a dramatic immigration policy pivot by Mr. Biden, who vowed to restore the U.S. asylum system as soon after taking office in 2021. After record levels of migrant apprehensions along the southern border in the past 3 years and growing discontent in Democratic-led cities receiving migrants, Mr. Biden's administration has embraced some restrictions on asylum. Okay. If Mr. Biden decides to invoke the authority, says CBS News, his administration would face significant operational challenges implementing it at scale. Last year, the administration enacted a regulation that presumes migrants don't qualify for asylum if they enter the U.S. illegally after not seeking protection in a third country. But it has not been able to screen all migrants who cross into the U.S. illegally under those standards, given insufficient numbers of asylum officers, detention beds, and other resources. Instead, most border crossers in recent months have been released with court dates that take years to be decided due to a massive backlog of applications. That's why you need more resources. This move would almost certainly face lawsuits also if implemented. Lower courts blocked the government in the Trump administration from using the 212F authority to render most migrants ineligible for asylum at the southern border. It's unclear how the Biden administration expects its own effort to invoke the 212F authority to prevail in court. U.S. law gives migrants on American soil the right to request asylum, even if they cross the border without authorization. See, this is the issue. If the law says, hey, you as a migrant have the right to request asylum, even if you don't cross at the border with an appointment on the app, even if you cross a river between the border crossings, you have the right to do it as long as you're on U.S. soil. So Biden can say, I'm doing this, but then somebody sues and says, no, it's against the law. That's a reason why, if you really want to do it and have it stick, better to just change the law. But I don't know if the Biden administration expects its own effort to prevail in court. Some of you guys have been talking about this. Maybe the point for Biden is not for it to actually prevail in court. Maybe the point is just say you're doing it, then you get sued, then it gets tied up in the courts, and it never actually happens, but you can say you did it, right? So, Shaggy says Biden wants the GOP to stop him. I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily be the GOP suing him. It'd be the ACLU possibly suing him. You can see the ACLU lawyer successfully convinced federal judges to halt the Trump administration's asylum ban, indicated the government would likely be sued again if Biden issues a similar order. So, I don't know. Maybe he would just do this knowing it's going to get stopped by the courts. Let's see here. Dalton Fury says, wow, politics are crazy, eh? Griff's P. Dax said, why would the GOP stop this? This is good. Well, I mean, if they wanted to stop it and it's an executive order, they would have to maybe file a lawsuit or something. Somebody will file lawsuits. Will inevitably happen if he tries to do this himself. Smedley thinks the law allowing people to request asylum even if they cross illegally is among the stupidest laws ever. Now, I don't know about the history of the law. I'm assuming when that law was passed, there were not nearly as many people actually asking for asylum, though. Let's see here. By the way, I think somebody, again, is talking about YouTube. So let me say this again, because every 5-10 minutes somebody says, you're not on YouTube. We are on YouTube, but say it with me, we're on Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube, not Agenda Free TV. If you go to Agenda Free TV on YouTube, you will not see a live stream.
Welcome to Agenda.
We are not live on Agenda Free TV. There's a second channel on YouTube where we do like sometimes developing stories, smaller stories. This is more of a developing story. We're live right there, Agenda Free TV 2, live right there on Agenda Free TV 2. That's on YouTube. So there's 2 channels on YouTube. On the other platforms, there's 1 channel. One viewer is very, very bitter that we're not live on YouTube. Very angry, saying they're not going to watch the stream anymore because they're so angry that we're not on YouTube. Well, we are on YouTube. Okay, we're going to show you what Axios is reporting about this too. Biden's bold and risky border move. Wow, we'll have to check that out. Let's see here. Take some more comments here from you guys. Thanks to our mods, by the way. Danny James moderating over there on YouTube right now. Beezy, thank you. We have, let's see. Linda Belk, Larry moderate for us on X. Thanks so much. Over there on Twitch. David Green, Good Luck Duck, Idaho Star, I Got That Fire. Sharon C54. Hey, thanks Trisha DeVos for the Facebook stars, by the way. Really appreciate that. Connie Ori for the Facebook stars, thank you. Kay Lowry Body moderating. Over there on Facebook. Christina Neal, Margaret Riley, Paul Anderson, and a shout out to Valerie Gale Griffin. Shout out to our Facebook subscribers too, like Julie Cantrell Smith, Billy Joe Drays, Juster Singer, Kay Larry Body, Margaret Riley. Appreciate all of our subscribers over there. Okay. Let's see what Axios has to say. Again, multiple outlets reporting that President Biden is considering unilateral, taking executive action to impose strong border restrictions, possibly saying that if you cross the border illegally, if you're not doing it if you don't like have an appointment to go to a border crossing, you will not even be allowed to request asylum. We're hearing he might do that. He might attempt to just take executive order to say no more illegal. Anybody who's across the country illegal cannot even request asylum. That would be a huge, huge difference. Axios reports, in a sign of how concerned the White House is over immigration, Biden is considering borrowing a page from former President Trump. The Senate's bipartisan border negotiations are dead. So there's not going to be anytime soon, a new border law. But the president's political problem at the border hasn't gone away. The dramatic actions that Biden is considering on the southern border, including an executive order that would restrict the ability of migrants to even claim asylum, to ask for asylum, don't require congressional approval. We don't know if they're legal or not. Through executive action, Biden would attempt to turn asylum seekers away at the border if they cross illegally, similar to what the Senate compromise plan contemplated, as first reported by CNN. Again, normally, even if you cross through the desert, or you cross on a river, and then the Border Patrol catches you, normally, U.S. law says you can say, I request asylum. And when you do that, they can't just put you in a truck or put you in a plane and ship you over the border. You have to be processed a certain way. They have to investigate your asylum claim. If you pass an initial check, they have to, give you a court date or have to go through some investigation, which can take years. And then if they don't have enough detention facilities, then they're not going to put you in a detention facility because they don't have enough, and they might just let you out in the country. A lot of people get let out in the country and told to come back in a few years for their court date. So that's what normally it is, because even if you get caught, you have the right under U.S. law to ask for asylum. This would be a big change. It'd say if you're caught illegally crossing the border, you don't get to ask. There's no process you get to go through. That would be a huge change. Trump repeatedly tried to restrict access to asylum and is planning to do so again if he returns to the White House. The legal authority that Biden is considering powered Trump's Muslim ban and similar sweeping restrictions at the border, which got tied up in courts. If elected again, Trump wants to use Section 212F of the U.S. Code, which Biden is supposedly considering using, which grants the president broad power to suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens or as immigrants or non-immigrants if their entry would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. Okay, the bottom line, the actions under consideration will inflame Latino groups. So, someone said, what's the risk to Biden? Well, maybe there's certain constituencies, certain Democratic voters who will not like that he tries to do this. The actions under consideration will inflame Latino groups in the progressive wing of Biden's party, which has expressed alarm about some of the policy changes Biden has been mulling. Okay, so just do not know if this is going to happen. Be a really big deal. Would be a really big deal. Take a few more comments here. Gregory Scott says there are laws in place where if you have to seek asylum in the neighboring country before coming to the U.S., I don't know what the status of that is. I know different presidents have tried to put something like that in. I don't know if that's, what the current law is on that right now. Let's see here. I Can Cast says it's not like they will vote for Trump instead. The thing is, though, maybe there are some Democrats who this upsets them and they don't vote for Trump. They just don't vote. Turnout can be important in elections. So in theory, you want to motivate your voters to turn out and not vote. Diane Allworth says, I know it'll get tied up, I think she's saying in the courts, but all Americans should be concerned about the border. David Ferriello says, and then they don't return for their court date. Sometimes people don't. I don't know what the numbers are on that. Percentage of people who return for their court date if they're given a court date years ahead, and migrants who get led into the country and said come back for your court date in several years. I don't know. Yeah, again, Agenda on YouTube. This is Agenda Free TV too. This channel is there's certain stories that maybe are more developing stories. Like in the past, sometimes like if we're covering a hurricane and it's kind of just at the start of the developing, we'll start covering it on Agenda Free TV too. See, like it says here, this was a couple years ago, new hurricane threat for Gulf Coast. And then if it develops into a hurricane, we'll cover it on Agenda Free TV 1. So we haven't been on this channel much lately. But I'd like to be on it a bit more. So again, it's only on YouTube. On the other channels, on the other platforms, it's everything's on one channel. Only on YouTube do we have two channels. Yeah, some people are saying there needs to be a direct link to it. The thing is, we've been using it not that often lately, so I don't love to put a link up to a channel that we haven't been so active on. So if we start using it more, I'll post I'll put up a direct link to it. I wonder if any politicians are commenting on this story. Let's see here. NBC News. I haven't even shown you this. NBC News. Biden administration weighs action to make it harder for migrants to get asylum and easier to deport them faster. Making it harder for migrants to qualify for asylum and deporting more recently arrived migrants are considered low-hanging fruit and actions that can be taken quickly. How about not letting them ask for asylum? Did they talk about this in this article? This is a little bit of a different article. It's from today, though. The Biden administration is considering taking unilateral action without Congress to make it harder for migrants to pass the initial screening for asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border and quickly deport recently arrived migrants who don't meet the criteria. The actions, which are still weeks away from finalization, that's different than the reporting in a couple other outlets that said it could happen in the next week or two. The actions are an effort to lower the number of migrants crossing the southern border illegally, as immigration remains a top issue for voters heading into the presidential election. Under the new policy, says NBC News, asylum officers would be instructed to raise the standards they use in their credible fear interviews, the first screening given to asylum seekers who are trying to avoid deportation for crossing the border illegally. And Immigration and Customs Enforcement would be told to prioritize recently arrived migrants for deportation in a last in, first out policy, the officials said. It's really interesting. Again, it's so much of the issue here results from legally the law saying that people crossing illegally still have the right to ask for asylum. It's not the case that legally when people are caught crossing the border that they can just be put in a truck or a plane and taken out of the country. If they ask for asylum, they're allowed to, and you have to interview them, and there's certain procedures you have to go through, but they have a legal right to ask for asylum. That is the law. Now, that could be changed. Congress could change that law, but that's on the books. That's been on the books for a while. Now, some people might say, well, some of them aren't really here for asylum, but look. Even if people are trying to better their lives and they think there's a decent chance that they can pass the initial interview and then be allowed to stay in the country for a few years before their court date happens because there's such a backlog of court cases, you can see why people who are trying to get a better life might be motivated to try to cross illegally. But it's just, I think that's an interesting point that some people might not realize, not obvious about the American system. It's that there's that real issue of just the law does allow people who cross illegally to ask for asylum when they are caught. Asylum is, basically protection from persecution and mistreatment in their home country. Let's see here. AP also is showing this. It has a story. The White House is weighing executive action on the border with immigration powers used by Trump. Jada Maru says he left the border wide open for almost 4 years and now he cares. Yep, must be an election year. Moose says need valid reason for asylum if fleeing from danger. Oh shoot, that's all of Mexico. Linda Belk says, I can see people wanting to come to the U.S. I can also see that we can get overwhelmed by them. And I am not an expert on the history of immigration law. But from what I understand, if I'm remembering right, the immigration law in the U.S. was that gives people the right to request asylum, even if they crossed into the U.S. illegally. That was written at a very different time. I can't imagine if there were no immigration law and it was being written now when all of these people are trying to get into the U.S. way more than before, they probably wouldn't have written the law the same way. But if the law doesn't get changed, if Congress can't agree on changing it, it just stays the same. So, the law that was passed in a very different time is still in effect now. Now, Congress can change the law, but they got to agree to change it. Josh Likes Diesel says, I'm glad they will use Trump's policy. We will get results then. Well, the Trump policy they might use was actually, I think, got tied up in the courts. They might get tied up in the courts too. Let me just skim through this, see if there's anything else here. The White House is considering using provisions of federal immigration law repeatedly tapped by former President Trump to unilaterally, one-sidedly enact a sweeping crackdown at the southern border. A sweeping crackdown at the southern border. The administration, stymied by Republican lawmakers who rejected a negotiated border bill earlier this month, has been exploring options that President Biden could deploy on his own without congressional approval. But the plans are nowhere near finalized, and it's unclear how the administration would draft any such executive actions in a way that would have survived the inevitable legal challenges, as we've been talking about. The exploration of such avenues by Biden's team underscores the pressure the president faces this election year on immigration and the border, which have been among his biggest political liabilities since he took office. The administration is aware that of the political perils that high numbers of migrants could pose for the president and is scrambling to figure out how Biden could ease the problem on its own. You know, it's interesting because earlier we were talking about, well, maybe Biden figures the courts aren't going to allow this to happen. I'll just try to do it, but the courts will shoot it down, whatever, and then I can say I tried. But this is interesting here because what the AP is saying here is maybe Biden really is worried that there's going to be like a surge of migrants coming over in the summer, and he doesn't want that. That would be bad for his election prospects. So maybe this is really if he does it, it really is a genuine effort to try to get these stricter regulations into force. It's an interesting thought. Okay. Arrests for illegal crossings on the border with Mexico fell by half in January from the record highs in December to the third lowest month of Biden's presidency, but officials fear those figures could eventually rise again, particularly as the November presidential election nears. The Immigration Authority the administration has been looking into is outlined in Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which gives a president broad leeway to block entry of certain immigrants into the United States if it would be detrimental to the national interest of the United States. Trump repeatedly leaned on the 212F power while in office, including his controversial ban to bar travelers from Muslim-majority nations. Biden rescinded that ban on the first day in office through executive order. But now how Biden would deploy that power to deal with his own immigration challenges is currently being considered. For example, the ban could kick in when border crossings hit a certain number. Faye Bowen says, time will tell how this pans out. We'll take a few more comments. Do you think President Biden will take unilateral action in the coming weeks and say, I'm going to take executive action and severely restrict how many people can ask for asylum or whether people can ask for asylum coming across the border? Sea Turtle says it's politically motivated because of the election. Harvinius says would be interesting. Emily Brooks says, I will have more respect for Biden if he does this. I feel like he has woken up out of his slumber. Lego Mike thinks it's for his personal gain, not for the people's. Jonathan Morris says there could be a huge caravan again. Yeah, I don't think Biden wants us. If suppose there's a month in the middle or in the fall, middle of the year or in the fall where it really surges, I don't think Biden wants that to happen. April Coco says, politically motivated or not, something is needed to be done. And again, a date to keep in mind is it looks like the November 7th, March 7th State of the Union address. Some of the articles say that he might do something before then. Exoria says, can't Biden just executive order it? Well, that's what we're talking about happening. But there would be legal challenges if he did that. It's a big deal. I mean, I really do. I think it's easy to forget, like, wow, what a big deal it is that a Democratic president is now weighing executive actions to make for a sweeping crackdown on the border. Nick Rose says, time to get serious. I got a question. Why isn't your YouTube live right now? Everyone, it is live, but it's on Agenda Free TV too. It's our other channel on YouTube. If you go to the first channel, Agenda Free TV.
Welcome to Agenda.
Sorry. Go to Agenda Free TV on YouTube. Go down to where it says channels at the bottom. Oh, you can't see it. Hold on. Go down to the bottom. It says Steve's other channels right there, Agenda Free TV 2. That's the one we're on. We covered some like developing stories, some smaller stories over there. That's where we are. Okay. ABC News, everybody says in an article, ABC News has one, Biden weighs tightening asylum restrictions to the southern border. Okay. Okay. KB says, what are the restrictions? So real quick, just to summarize what some of the restrictions could be. Biden could say, according to the articles, one thing he might do is say anyone crossing illegally is not allowed to ask for asylum. That is not the case now. You swim across a river, if you cross through the desert and then the Border Patrol comes up to you, you can just ask for asylum. You're allowed to do that. They can't just take you and throw you out of the country. Most of the people who ask for asylum are people who are doing it illegally. An example of doing it legally would be if you use the Border Patrol app, CBP1 I think it is, and you made an appointment to be at the Border Patrol, be at a border crossing at a certain time and ask for asylum then. That would be, as I understand it, that's asking for asylum legally. A way to ask for asylum, that's after crossing legally at a border crossing or going legally to a border crossing and then asking. Illegally crossing and then asking for asylum would just be like, I'm going to go through a hole in the fence or something. And then the Border Patrol comes up to you and you say, I ask for asylum, right? And most of the people who ask for asylum, as I understand it, are people asking after illegally crossing. So as the New York Times says, the move would suspend long-time guarantees that give anyone who steps onto U.S. soil, even crossing illegally, the right to ask for a safe haven. Executive action could prevent people who cross illegally to the United States from claiming asylum. So that's one thing they could do. Another thing would be to make it harder for people to pass the initial quick questioning. There's like an initial questioning you're given about, what is this asylum claim? Why are you asking for asylum? And you have to pass that to show there has to be, I forget what the exact standard is, but the Border Patrol agent has to think there's a certain there's a reasonable chance you have a good claim to asylum. But if you make that harder to pass, then if you don't pass that initial claim, I believe you can get thrown out. So if you make it harder to pass that initial interview, then you'll have fewer people who are given a court date a few years from now, and told to just stay in the country until your court date, for example. You can see down here in the New York Times article, it says, blah, 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 blah. Where is it here? Is it in here? No, if you go to one of the other articles, like here, the CNN article, does it talk about it? Blah, 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 blah. Maybe not. We read about it in one of them. Politico. The administration is also discussing ways to make it harder for migrants to pass the initial screening for asylum seekers, essentially raising the credible fear standard, as well as ways to quickly deport others who don't meet those elevated asylum standards. So these are some of the examples of the things they're considering. Okay. Take a few more comments. Saggy Bean says, I didn't even know there was Agenda-Free TV 2. Yeah, we sort of, Agenda-Free TV 2 on YouTube, it's been, sometimes we stream there more, sometimes less, but we're doing that tonight. So now you know. So maybe next time we stream on Agenda-Free TV 2, you'll know. All right, well, we'll have to see if this happens. We will have to see if it happens. Zinc Commando says, you can just illegally cross and just not get thrown out. What a system. Timber T24 says, Joe will make another announcement saying the border isn't open. Look, it is interesting, this idea that if Biden decides to, maybe Biden thinks, and the Biden administration thinks, well, if Biden unilaterally, takes executive action to severely restrict the people crossing the border, maybe the Biden administration thinks, well, eventually it's going to get overturned in the courts, but he could, but that would take a little time for the courts to get involved. So he could, if he did this, make this big national speech where he says, I'm doing this. Republicans didn't want to do it, but I'm doing it. I'm closing the border. And again, maybe it gets overturned in the courts a week later. The courts 3 days later put a stop to it or something like that. But maybe he wants to have that moment. Cell Game says he wants to remove Trump's talking point of the border crisis. Several of these articles talk about how the border is seen as a weak area for him. One of our viewers says court dates are like, is Exoria says court dates are like 5 years out. Some of them are a number of years out. Average court date, wait, asylum. Let's see. AP article from last year. Immigrants waiting 10 years in U.S. just to get a court date. U.S. immigration offices have become so overwhelmed with processing migrants for court that some asylum seekers who cross the border at Mexico may be waiting a decade before they even get a date to see a judge. Offices in some cities are telling migrants to come back years from now. For some places, they're told to wait like 3 or 4 years, and some even 10 years. It says here. Until then, they won't even get an initial court appearance on the books, though they can live and work in the U.S. After that, their case will work its way through the U.S. immigrant courts, a process that takes about 4 years amid a backlog that reached 2.1 million cases. This is a 2023 article. That's from AP. Shaggy says, I think Shaggy's being sarcastic here. Shaggy says, Biden is so inept, he just flipped the script on the entire GOP agenda. Look, I do think that, we covered a special election a couple weeks ago in New York, where it was for the seat that George Santos had, and George Santos got expelled from Congress. And this was a seat that had been, it's a swingy district in New York, and in recent elections it had gone Democrat, but in the previous election it had gone to Santos, a Republican, by 8 points. And the Democrat in the race won. Tom Suozzi won a couple weeks ago, pretty convincingly, by like 8 points or something. But he ran like a tough, one of his big policy things was being tough on immigration. He took a tough position on immigration. And when he won, there was this talk about maybe a lot of Democrats this fall are gonna do that, and rather than try to emulate him, and rather than run, on a permissive immigration policy or just trying to avoid talking about it, maybe Democrats see this as an issue where, like, hey, it's a big issue. Rather than being vulnerable on it, let's just go strong on it and see if you risk turning off your base, but you might see a lot more of that. And maybe this is just a strategy they're gonna settle on. Like, we don't want to just give up this issue to Republicans. Now, I haven't read this article. This is The Nation, which I think I think they're a pretty left-wing publication. Am I wrong? I'll have to look this up. They have an article from February saying the Democrats' hard right turn on immigration is a disaster in every way. It's amoral, it's desperate, it's politically reckless, it's wrong no matter how you look at it. So this would be like a progressive outlet that does not like what they're doing. And then look at, this is what I was talking about. In New York win, Democrats sense a pivot on immigration and border politics. Tom Suozzi's victory in that special election a couple weeks ago, coming after congressional Republicans killed a bipartisan border security package, could provide Democrats with a roadmap to shoring up two political vulnerabilities. So they talk about how, what was it here? In the final 10 days of the race, Democrats were airing more ads than Republicans on immigration, with Mr. Suozzi's campaign running clips of an appearance he once made on Fox News in which he was introduced as one of the Democrats backing ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency. So will Democrats be taking a what's more of a traditionally Republican view on immigration coming into the fall? Doug Rabbit says yes, could really backfire with the left wing and young voters. Tater Monk says immigration should be a priority for all sides. Wessie's Corner Emporium says, sees what sticks approach. Deb Castine Hilton says, if there's no crisis and Mayorkas is doing his job, then why is Biden doing this? Is he admitting that Mayorkas is not doing his job and is rightfully being impeached? I don't think he thinks that Mayorkas is rightfully being impeached. Remember, impeachment in the Constitution is for treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors. So somebody not doing their job great, I'm not saying Mayorkas is or isn't. I'm just saying, in theory, somebody not doing their job great is not a acceptable reason in itself, according to the Constitution, for impeachment. It's me, Jeff G. says, Democrats know they are toast. That is why they are shifting so hard. ICANcast says, progressives won't win you an election. Moderates will. Interesting. All right. I think we're getting close. So very interesting. I am really interested in seeing. I honestly don't know what's going to happen here. It'll be really interesting to see if Biden does take some big executive action and puts really strong new restrictions on the border, regardless of whether the court system eventually says, no, you can't do that. So it's really, it'll be really interesting. Shaggy thinks Biden is going to do it. We did a poll before, like 63% of people on YouTube thought he was going to do it. It was more like 50-something% on Twitch. Yeah, I know. Linda mentioned that the logo doesn't say AFTV2. It's a little confusing. I have an Agenda Free TV2 logo, but the thing is, on Twitch and on Facebook, we're still on Agenda Free TV. So just for simplicity's sake, I just kept the logo up as Agenda Free TV, because it's not, again, Agenda Free TV2 is just on YouTube, but not on the others. Anyways, hopefully people figure it out eventually. Let's see here. All right, guys, I really appreciate you joining us here on Agenda Free TV 2 on YouTube and on Agenda Free TV Regular on Twitch and Facebook and Twitter. So I think we're going to wrap up this live stream. But if you watch us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to Agenda Free TV 2 as well as Agenda Free TV, because we do sometimes come on this channel on YouTube to cover some of the developing stories, some of the smaller stories. If you're watching on the other platforms, you don't have to do anything. Just stay. It's all the same channel. But I'm going to try to. Maybe we might be covering some more on this. Sometimes I forget we even have this channel. Then I'm like, oh, we should have done that story there. So try to do some more stories over here. And also a reminder. And speaking of other channels, I do have a personal channel where I do non-news videos, and we're actually next week, I'm supposed to go out of the country, and we're going to be doing a bunch of live streaming out of the country on the personal channel. Lookner on YouTube and Look Nerd on Twitch. Oh, I missed something too. What did I miss? Hold on, I'll talk about this in a second. Oh, Doug Cahill. Doug Cahill gave memberships? Why did it not come up here? Oh, no, the Doug Cahill was yesterday. What did I miss, Kay? Kay, what did I miss? Tell me. Looks like I missed a donation. Cahill messaged me. Anyways, but I interrupted myself too. My fault. Thank you, Kay, though. So we are going to be I'm going to be going to Paris. And my plan is, first of all, I'm going to have my laptop with me. So if there's some huge story, I should be able to cover it on Agenda Free TV, right? It won't look exactly the same, but I am bringing my laptop with me. And so I'm not going to just not cover any news. If there's big news, maybe I'll miss a story or something like that. But, if there's some huge story, I'll do my best to get on the air and cover it. But Also, for the first time, we're doing this thing where I'm really going to make a priority to do a bunch of streaming on my personal channel, which is Lookner on YouTube and Look Nerd on Twitch. Lookner on YouTube and Look Nerd on Twitch. And we're going to be doing a bunch of streaming from Paris, of all places. So I hope, feel free to tune into that if that interests you. Maybe it doesn't interest you at all. But if it does, tune in. We're going to do some interactive live streaming there. Should be fun. I think I'm going to be covering, my plan is to cover Super Tuesday from there. But it's like a 6-hour time difference from Eastern time. So it'll be really late for me. But I do want to do a stream on Super Tuesday to cover that. But it'll be from there, so I'll be up really late. Hey, thanks to Billy Joe Drage for the stars. Thanks, Billy Joe, for the Facebook stars. Oh, Diane Allworth. Oops. Where is it here? I missed it. Diane Allworth gave Facebook stars too. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Kay, for letting me know. Let's see here. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to thank our moderators. By the way, I think the streams from Paris are going to be on the ones that on my personal channel is on YouTube and Twitch. Lookner and Look Nerd. Lookner on YouTube, Look Nerd on Twitch. So I really appreciate you joining the stream tonight. Also, thanks to our moderators. Huge thanks to them. They are awesome. And I really appreciate them being here and moderating for us and allowing us to have chat rooms. Really interesting chat tonight. We had a lot of different opinions in the chat. Interesting chat, interesting questions. Danny James moderating over there on YouTube. Cynthia Moon. We had a lot of moderators over there. Sarah55, BZ. Thanks to all of our YouTube mods and our Twitch moderators. Hey, by the way, thanks Lynn Powell for the Facebook stars. Thank you, Lynn. Our Twitch mods like Idaho Star, David Green, Good Luck Duck. I Got That Fire, Sharon C54. Over there on Facebook, Kay Lowry Body modding. Christina Neal, Valerie Gail Griffin, Paul Anderson, Margaret Riley, thank you. Linda Belk and Larry moderating over there on X, thank you. Thanks to all of what was I going to say? Thanks to our subscribers on Facebook, like our 12-month subscriber. Wow, Lacey Carter, that's awesome. Thanks, Lacey. Really appreciate all your support. And Duster Singer, Billy Joe Drays, thanks for subscribing. Diane Allworth, Margaret Riley, Kay Lowry Body, Eve Richards. Thanks to all our subs over there. And our subscribers on Twitch, thank you. Oh, thanks to Rain Mist for subscribing. Thanks, Rain Mist. Dalton Fury, thank you for subscribing on Twitch. Also, Jack's Animals, David Green for subscribing. Aaron Weirdo, I Got That Fire, Shaggy, Integrity Farmer Bob, I'm a Peaky Blinder, Wall Street. Shout out to our subscribers. And also Sidewalk Connoisseur, thanks. And all of our subscribers over there on Twitch. And our YouTube, thanks to our YouTube members. There's no members on this channel. We haven't been on this channel enough to really have that. But we have a bunch of members on Agenda Free TV regular. So thank you for being members over there. And everybody else who donated earlier. Your donations are what allows me to do the channels. So really appreciate it. You can always donate if you want to donate to at agendafree.tv, agendafree.tv. Saturday night I am going to be doing live coverage this Saturday night on regular Agenda Free TV of the South Carolina primary. So we will definitely do that. South Carolina primary coverage coming up. South Carolina primary on Agenda Free TV on Saturday night. So get ready for that. Sign up for notifications. We have a notification system that we've created. It works awesome. Tells you when we're going live. It's free. You sign up once. You get sent a notification every time we're going live. It works great. We do it through Discord. Sign up for that. Make sure you don't miss broadcast. The mods can post that link in the chat. Appreciate our Discord mods, by the way. Thanks, Discord mods. And if you want, you could put do what I do, put the Discord app on your phone, and the notifications will pop up on your phone. Also, at the same link, you can check out our Discord chat. You can chat with other viewers when we are not on the air. Some of our viewers like doing that. All right. I think we're wrapping this one up. I think that's what's happening. Oh, and you can follow me on X, at Lookner. If I hear updates about this or other stories, I post them on X where I cover breaking news, at Lookner. And you can follow Agenda Free TV on X, at Agenda Free TV. Okay, thanks to viewers like Megatron, and Tom Mix says this is like the secret channel for superfans. Hopefully it's not a secret for that much longer, but we're on here once in a while. Rufus from Louisiana, thanks for being here. I'm a Peaky Blinder. Luna Ali Syria. Nick Nembus says South Carolina will be interesting. Ryan Minded says AFTV2 has the best chat. Alibaba, thanks for being here. By the Sea, and all of our other viewers. All right, guys, I am wrapping up this stream. Really appreciate you joining me. Uncle Sloppy, thanks for being here. Anonymous. Excuse me. Oh, Leanne Ticknor, one of our subscribers too. Thanks, Leanne, for being here. And also our viewer, Hannah Conte. Thanks for being here, Hannah. Hannah, they have anniversary follower badges on Facebook. I've never seen that before. That's interesting. All right, guys. So that's it. We've been covering live the reports about that President Biden that he is considering imposing major new border restrictions. Will it happen? We'll have to just see. We will have to just see. All right, guys. That is it for now. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you soon with more live breaking news coverage right here at Agenda Free TV and on YouTube, sometimes at Agenda Free TV too.